All right, excellent. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are doing something special. This is a special live webinar between myself. I'm Dr. Will Bulsiewicz. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a gastroenterologist in Charleston, South Carolina. And I wrote a book, which you can see over my shoulder right here, called Fiber Fueled. That was a New York Times best-selling book. Very proud of that book. And I'm very, very excited to be joined here today by Dr. Tim Spector. He is literally perhaps the world's expert on the microbiome. I mean, it's hard to be hyperbolic when we're talking about Tim. He is quite incredible, and I could spend a lot of time talking about his accolades. I'm just going to run through a few of them real quick, and then we're going to go ahead and get started in just a moment here. But for those of you who have not come across Dr. Spector and his work before, let me introduce you. He is a Sunday Times best-selling author. Sunday Times is the UK equivalent of the New York Times. It's a very high honor. He is a medical doctor. He is a professor of genetic epidemiology, and he is the director of the Twins UK registry at King's College in London. So I actually came across him for the first time because of the Twins UK registry. It is a treasure trove of amazing genetic research, and it's something that he started. This is the largest collection of twins, identical and fraternal, that exists. Over 13,000 twins are a part of this ongoing clinical research study, which is quite amazing. And he has published nearly 1,200 research studies. That is ridiculous. I'm just going to tell you, to publish one paper is a lot of work. 1,200 of them, I don't know how anyone does that. So he is ranked as one of the top 1% of the world's most published scientists by Reuters. So with regard to his book, he's actually written several books. This is spoon-fed, all right? And you're going to want to grab a copy of this, but he also has another book called The Diet Myth. And so if you enjoy our conversation today, make sure you grab a copy of The Diet Myth and Spoon-Fed. And part of what we're going to talk about today is personalized nutrition, a journey that Dr. Spector started formally in 2017 when he became the co-founder of a nutritional science company called ZOE. And ZOE is quite unique. I'm a big fan, and I'll be talking more about this because what they have done is they invested into clinical research first before launching the product publicly. They just launched the product very recently in the United States, about a year ago. And soon, I can't give you a date, but soon to be launched in the UK. If you are in the UK, stay tuned. So this company brings together researchers from King's College London, Massachusetts General Hospital, which is Harvard, Tufts University, Stanford University. You've probably heard of these places. And they all collectively are working, trying to disentangle how we are personal and unique in our response to food, because we are not all the same. We are unique. So that's what ZOE is really about. And I'll say this now, and then I'll bring it up again at the end. If you want to learn more about ZOE, you can go to the website, joinzoe.com/Dr. B. All right, join ZOE. That's one word, JOINZOE, joinzoe.com/Dr. B. And if you decide that you want to take the plunge, you may want to write this down, but it's also in the PDF that we sent to you guys. If you decide that you want to take the plunge and learn about your personal response to different foods, use the code WILLANDTIM10 to save some cash. So anyway, with that in mind, Dr. Spector, if you want to turn on your video.
Yeah, it says you have to turn me on, I think.
Ah, interesting. Let me make you a co-host. And perhaps that will allow you to turn on your video. There we go.
Amazing, right. It worked. Right.
We are in business.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I've been here hiding, so I've been listening to this great intro. So yeah, thanks for that. And it's great to be discussing our favorite topic together. I think we have so many common interests and thoughts, which is fantastic.
I think that what's interesting is that the common interests are there, and that's because you and I see this paradigm shift that's taking place in the world of science, where we ignored this part of our body, in part because we lacked the technology to understand it. We didn't have the laboratory testing, and believe it or not, we didn't have the power in our computers until very recently in order to really start to analyze this. And you and I both see that there is this paradigm shift taking place in science, that we have to rethink how we're approaching this.
Yeah, but it's rare amongst medics, I think, to seize new opportunities. They're normally very skeptical about anything new, and so often not the fastest people to react to some of these new findings. So I think that's why, you know, people like yourselves are, you know, pretty unique in that, you know, we're specialists in our fields, but, you know, happy to go outside the comfort zone and embrace some of this new stuff.
I think when you have the tools, when you have the education, and also when you feel compelled to do something, then that allows you to do it. And, you know, they say that it takes 17 years from the day that a study is published to actually work its way into clinical practice. But the beauty of 2021 is that people can have it today. They don't have to wait. So that's an exciting thing. All right. So Dr. Tim, you know, I just sat here and I was celebrating your accolades, and it makes you sound like you are just a machine who works all day and all night. And before we jump in and start talking about the gut microbiome, tell us something about yourself. What do you like to do outside of work, outside of published papers, and do these types of things?
I like sports. So whenever I can, I cycle to work when I'm in London, and cycle for recreation. I also do ocean swimming, and I have a place in Spain, and do I've started to do longer distance swimming than I used to. Walking, and I'm a big skier, so I do ski touring, which and try and go every year to the Rockies in Canada and do some real outback skiing there, which is fun. I just, you know, like to do something very different to my normal day job, and to take me away to change my mind. So they're things I like doing, and I like traveling. I speak several languages, and like exploring different foods and cultures, and I've been very lucky, and my job has allowed me to do that. And being an academic, one of the disadvantages of having to write all those papers and grants, the advantage is you often get to go all around the world and meet fascinating people at the same time. And it's been fun. And I only ever do things that I enjoy doing. And so that's in a way why my career has evolved from a rheumatologist, seeing people with back pain in clinics, which is great, but you don't necessarily want to do it for the whole of your career, to studying gut health and following the action that I think is the most exciting thing. So I consider myself pretty lucky, really, but I'm a bit too busy recently because of COVID. That's given me yet another job to do, and the ZOE app that's been dealing with COVID as well is unexpected on top of all the other things. And I'm trying to finish off another book as well. So it's been a busy year.
You are a busy guy. You, by the way, Ellen has just invited you to come ski in Utah if you're interested. So I just want you to know. Perhaps you could comment real quick on the ZOE app with regards to COVID, because this was a pivot for the company that was unexpected, and many people may not even realize what that is.
Yeah, I think people from the UK know about it, but we did also launch in the US and Sweden. And essentially, this came about in March last year, and the first day of lockdown in London. It was actually 5 days before. Everything was being shut down, and we decided to repurpose the app that we were building for nutrition with the ZOE team into something that might be useful for fighting COVID. By people, instead of logging their foods, they actually logged their symptoms, and we then use that to predict how whether they had COVID or not. And this is the days before PCRs and lateral flows, in those dark days when those first outbreaks came. And amazingly, not only did the team do it in 5 days, which is incredible, the government app took 5 months. With 50 times the finances, but basically, we within 24 hours we had 1 million people downloaded it, and within 2 weeks 2 million, and we got up to 4.5 million users, and we still have 1 million people giving us 18 months later, giving us daily data, giving us nutrition data, giving us mental health data, and it's proved an absolute gold mine. And people have said how much it helped them get through the pandemic as well. So it's really nice to have been involved in such a fantastic pro bono project that I think has also changed the way we're ever going to do health research again, because no one's going to write a grant, take 5 years to do it, then do it, send out questionnaires and wait another year and then do them, when you can do the whole thing in a week with a couple of software engineers. So I think that's the lesson that we've learned from this. COVID has been bad, but it's also really pushed the technology and given us fantastic new tools for the future. So yeah, it's been a real eye-opener, but a fantastic journey.
Yeah, any sort of stress can force you to grow and become stronger and find new ways to do things better. And it just makes too much sense. Why are we, handing people packets of paper and asking them to come to the clinic when every single one of us has one of these, and we all know how to use it? We're all pretty much addicted to it. So it just makes too much sense. So
yeah. So much of the medical system is still not digital properly, or doesn't join up. So it's I think this is going to be very empowering. The mobile phone, it will transform healthcare as we know it, and I think it could replace family doctors and many other triage areas and areas that in fact can be done with algorithms.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a move towards medicine shifting towards things that are more telemedicine. It opens up opportunity for people that live in places where they really don't have access to care. So there's a lot that is good that is coming out of this. And it's just interesting to consider the formation of, for example, a company like ZOE, which is a independent company, but that it has a very academic focus, a very academic spin, and it allows things to move very quickly, capturing the state-of-the-art technology, not waiting on grants to go through. And when people invest into being a part of the ZOE program, they are contributing to clinical research, and they're also receiving the reward of the clinical research.
Yeah, it's a new model really that I think is going to be embraced, where you've got the dynamism of a small company that is really motivated to get to its objectives. It's not tied down by all the bureaucracy of big medical centers and grant giving bodies. And so literally, we did this PREDICT study in less than a year, and it would have taken 5 years in the traditional way, and probably never have been done actually, because no one would have given you the money to do it because they thought it would be impossible. So I think definitely dynamic companies working with scientists, academics, doctors, but driven by that company and their freedom to operate really is the future of how we should be making these scientific advances. And I think it's this cooperation. But that's one reason that I agreed to go into ZOE, was that it was going to be based on science, not marketing. And that's where most of the money has gone, unlike many of the other companies in this area, which start with a little bit of technology and then just use a bit of marketing to do the rest.
Yeah. People are curious in the chat box about what ZOE is. So I just want to explain this for a brief moment and unpack some of the things that Dr. Spector was just referring to, which is that ZOE is a personalized nutrition company that brings together state-of-the-art technology. Perhaps you've heard of companies that do microbiome tests. Perhaps you've heard of companies that do a continuous glucose monitor. Well, ZOE has both of those things. You do a continuous glucose monitor, you do blood lipid testing, you have your microbiome testing. You collect all of this information, you bring it together, And this is what allows us to understand better the way that your personal body responds to different foods. One of the ways that this happens is that they use artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence, these high-powered computers that we didn't have 5 or 10 years ago, these computers are capable of taking all of this data, like a ridiculous amount of data, mining through it, and identifying the trends and patterns that exist that then allow us to understand how to provide feedback to people based upon their microbiome, based upon their continuous glucose monitor, based upon their blood lipid testing. So that's what ZOE is. And when Dr. Spector refers to the PREDICT studies, you guys, the PREDICT study, it's now in its 3rd iteration, PREDICT 3. But PREDICT 1 was the first study. It continues to churn out high quality research papers, been published in Nature Medicine twice, which is literally the top journal on the planet. And the PREDICT study was 1,000 people in the UK and 100 people in the US using these same technologies that you guys personally have access to if you are participating in the ZOE program, but using it as a part of a clinical trial to help to initially demonstrate that the technology works. And this is important because one of the things, so most of you probably know this about me, I'm on the scientific advisory board for ZOE. The reason why I'm there, the reason why I believe in this is because of the integrity of this company and the mission. And what I mean by integrity is they spent money to perform clinical trials before they ever launched it publicly. And they could have spent that money on marketing and sold you something that they never showed actually works. But instead, they published in the top journals on the planet to demonstrate that it works before they even turned it and made it available. And I think that's an important thing for people to understand. Tim, any thoughts on that you want to share?
No, that's exactly right. It's a holistic approach as well that's evolving. So, all scientists need to be honest that actually, every month you get a new discovery and you have to slightly tweak what's going on. So it's never going to be perfect. It's evolving. And I think people who join with us in these programs, whether it's in the early stage studies or the commercial product, are all contributing to the same research. So now we've got thousands of people doing this. Our data set is getting bigger. We find more interactions between, we can specify which foods control which microbes now, and we can give better advice. And so the whole idea is the more people join, the better everyone's advice individually gets. So it's a fantastic model really for doing science. And this is just not possible to scale it any way other than through this sort of commercial model that, we be getting up to 1 million people contributing their data in order to get better and better algorithms to predict how we're all going to respond to different foods. And so we can tailor these foods exactly to our own bodies. And so that's how it helps individuals, but it also at the same time massively helps science to uncover which are the good bugs, the bad bugs, how you can maybe eat different foods or probiotics to stimulate them. So and it's got all sorts of potential for how it interacts with medications and your drugs and all these different diseases and conditions that many people have. So yeah, I think we've got the right model. We just need to get it to grow globally, and then this is going to be an unstoppable machine.
Yeah, 100%. Just keeps getting better. So all right, we're going to take a break from talking about ZOE, and we're going to backtrack a little bit and start with the foundations and the basics, which is to talk about the gut microbiome. Dr. Spector, you shifted your career from focusing on genetics among twins to now focusing on the gut microbiome. Do you want to comment on why you made that shift? And then perhaps give us an introduction for the people who don't know a lot about this. Give us an introduction into the gut microbiome. Why is this so important?
Well, the gut microbiome is so important because it is considered really a new organ in our bodies. We call it a virtual organ. And rather than thinking about it as microbes, as little bugs, think of them as chemical factories. So basically, we've discovered that we've got this community of beings that produce thousands of chemicals for our body if we treat them right and feed them right. And this collection of chemicals, which we call metabolites, basically have all kinds of roles across our body. And just to remember that in our gut, we only produce about 20 of these chemicals ourselves, the sort of gut hormones, whereas these microbes produce thousands. So the complexity of how our body works is much more guided by the microbes than by our own cells. And once you realize this, you start to think, well, how do these chemicals work? They work in our brain. They can create neurochemicals that can make the difference between us being happy or sad. They can change our appetite levels to whether we feel full or not. Even some people believe whether we, tend to eat fatty foods or sugary foods. And they also change our metabolism, might change our metabolic rates in response to things like exercise. Crucial in our immune system, and we've learned this through COVID. People with good diets and good gut microbiomes are protected against severe COVID, but also other infections, food allergies, autoimmune diseases. And they're also key for controlling our weight. And we've done experiments ourselves in twins and mouse models showing you can actually make people put on weight or lose weight by switching around their microbes. So we're only just scratching the surface of what these guys do. And they also interact with antidepressant drugs, with a lot of gastro tablets like PPIs and things like this that they work in some people, don't work in other people, give you side effects. So they're really cool, but think of them as chemical factories that you need to feed right. And that's probably the best way to understand them. And the reason I got into it, really why I switched from being a genetics geek to a nutrition geek, was after about 15 years of looking how cool twins were and how similar they were, I started looking why beneath the surface, beneath those personalities of twins that have the same smile or the same way they hold a beer can, which, or you see those, the way they dress up in that Twinsburg, Ohio, which you probably know, but the scratch beneath the surface, you see that often one twin will get cancer, the other one won't. They die of different diseases. One is overweight, the other one will be skinny, one depressed, one happy. And I've been looking really for ages to try and work out why that would be. Why would these genetic clones be so different for some diseases when everything was telling us they shouldn't be different? And it turns out the reason is, having looked at all over the place, multiomics, I did lots of different studies on epigenomics and other little rabbit holes. The microbiome is the one big difference between identical twins. And that suddenly, for me, was this aha moment that could explain all of this. And that once you understand the importance of even having identical genes, but different microbes can have a different effect on your body, then suddenly all of this starts to make sense. And the nutrition myths and the diet myths and the problems we've had really sort of giving people good advice and why diets work for some people and not others suddenly just made sense. And this twin model of identical twins, clones, every bit of DNA and every bit of cell in their body the same, they've lived together for 18 years, still ending up different, and still getting different, and now getting different responses to food, as we found in those ZOE studies. That was, for me, the turning point in my career. And I said, the rest of my career, I'm going to dedicate to this. It's going to be integrally working out this link between the microbes, the foods you eat, and the health outcomes. And food is such an easy thing to change that, hey, this is the new miracle medicine.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about this from a historical perspective, which is that we many of us were raised in an era where we were of the belief that our genetic code was so powerful and so predictive of what would happen during our lifetime. And in a way, that is disempowering. It's like you're predetermined to develop disease, which is a terrifying idea. And in the year 2000, just kind of going back, looking at the history of this, in the year 2000, they completed the Human Genome Project, or became very close to completing the Human Genome Project. And Francis Collins was one of the ones. He's now the director of the NIH. And they really sincerely thought that they were going to cure cancer by doing this. And I think it was very disappointing for a lot of scientists. I'm sure, perhaps you were one of them who was disappointed. But what's interesting is that it has shifted our attention where we realized there's more to the story. And now here we are, and we're looking at the gut microbiome. And as you're alluding to, Dr. Spector, you could have identical twins, and they have literally the exact same genetic code. But you have shown through your research that they share only about 34% of the same microbes. So their microbiome is 66% different. And that's a part of the reason why we explain these differences in terms of health outcomes, body habitus, things of that variety. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think it's putting into context. Yeah, we've been brainwashed, and I was probably responsible for it as well when I was doing my genetic work because academics have to get grants, so you've got to go with your subject. That it was going to cure everything, and I think we've realized that for common diseases, genetics, we've reached its limitation now. It's not really going to give us anything else. We've already got to studies of 1 million people, and we're not going to find anything more. So many of my genetic colleagues are actually giving up and looking for other fields more interesting, rather than just carrying on doing less and less interesting work. So I think the take-home message for people who have been said, you can't fight your genes, there's nothing you can do. I think this identical twin model really shows everybody that they can absolutely, whatever genes your parents gave you, you still have the ability to alter how they work in your body through this, this new organ, the gut microbes. And I think that's a really important, empowering message for people. They can take control of their destiny. They are not just doomed as many doctors still believe.
So you spoke to the importance of the gut microbiome. And just to kind of summarize briefly for the 1,000 people that are here live on the call with us, the gut microbiome is critical to unpacking and processing our food. It is access to nutrients, which is perhaps the most life-giving, important thing that exists in our body. So they help us with our digestion of our food. They interact with our immune system, 70% of the immune system, right there in the lining of the gut. They regulate our metabolism in a very powerful way. They do affect our hormones on some level and do contribute to the balance of hormones that exists within our body. They affect our mood. They affect our brain function, our cognitive function, our memory, and they even alter and can affect the expression of our genetic code. So now that is a lot of stuff. And you and I, we could talk literally for hours on each one of these things. Let's zoom in on the metabolism for a moment and talk about the metabolism. And one of the points that you make in your book, Spoon-Fed, which I want to bring forward and talk about a little more, is that a calorie is not just a calorie. So perhaps you want to sort of unpack that, and we can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think people say, what I think is the most dangerous myth around. And I think the calorie is probably the most overhyped scientific fact in history, really, because everyone knows, a bowl of French fries and some lettuce are going to have different calories. Okay, but we've taken that simple fact, and the calories, just when you burn them, you know how much energy you get roughly. It's a sort of strange, like a cremation tool that you get, and you've used that 100-year-old experiment and turned it into a huge industry to basically give false value to foods and have that as the main reason that we're now looking at food under the guise of its calorie count, rather than the quality of the food or the constituents of the food or how it actually affects our innards and certainly how it affects our gut health. So it's like a blindfold that's put on us and said calories, calories, calories. That's all that matters. And we're obsessed. That's why we can't eat fats, because they're denser in calories than carbs. That's why we've just be obsessed with low calorie products that are reprocessed junk foods with even more ultra processed chemicals in them, while we've embraced artificial sweeteners because we call them, zero calorie, therefore it must be good, regardless of what that chemical's doing to our innards and metabolism. So that, it's dreadful. Now, they're the abuses, but the underlying science behind it is actually highly flawed. Calories in equals calories out. It's a meaningless term, and it implies that you can, if you exercise, you just burn off anything you eat, and there's a simple equation. That's what Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola have been promoting for years as the reason that, that's why they sponsor the Olympics and all the big sporting events, is to try and link the two. So you can drink as much as you like of sugary drinks as long as you go for a run afterwards. And of course, it doesn't work like that. And that also led to the myth that exercising is good for weight loss, forgetting that our body has this brilliant way of adapting so that if you exercise a lot, your body slows down metabolism to regain those lost calories, because that's how we evolved. So the links are there. But the other thing that actually the ZOE studies have shown us very nicely is if you give two people the same identical food, say these high-cal muffins, which anyone who's done the ZOE study knows about, for better or worse, and they, I'm certainly sick of them, but what we found is that some people, when they have a muffin, have a sugar spike and then a sugar dip, and 1 in 4 people will do that. So say you take two people, you and me, so you have a sugar dip after you've eaten the muffin, and we found out in the study of 1,100 people that people who had that sugar dip 3 hours after eating, without knowing what was going on in their sugar, reported feeling hungrier and reported feeling less energy several hours later, and end up eating an equivalent of about 300 calories more in that day. So the other person, say me, didn't get that sugar dip. I didn't feel as hungry. So the idea that a calorie is a calorie, that can't be true in that experiment. So we've just with that simple experiment about sugar dips, explained that the composition of the food is quite crucial. It's my doorbell going, so just ignore that. So the other experiments people have done is looking at ultra-processed food against natural food, whole foods of the same calorie count. And so I'm just going to undo my bell in case this keeps going on and on forever.
Yeah, no worries. Let me make a quick comment on what you were commenting on about what you were mentioning about the sugar dips before you jump into the ultra processed foods. And I think you're going to talk about Kevin Hall study and perhaps some ZOE data. So what Dr. Spector is referring to, you guys, is a paper that was published in Nature Endocrinology in April of this year, April 2021. Again, one of the top medical journals on the planet, from ZOE scientists led by Dr. Anna Valdez, who's at Nottingham University. And what's interesting and unique about this is that, again, people were fed the same number of calories, but some people had this dip. If you were monitoring their blood sugar, they dipped it. And what happened during that time, think about this, put yourself in this position. You eat a meal, and then about an hour or 90 minutes later, you feel exhausted, okay? That is the person who's having the sugar dip. Their energy levels drop. And guess what happens? When your energy levels drop, you feel exhausted, your blood sugar is dipping, your brain is saying, I need energy. I need energy to survive. And what happens is that you then kick in mechanisms in your body that you don't have control over anymore. You feel compelled to eat. And so what ended up happening in this study is that people were eating the same number of calories at this initial meal, but then the people who had this sugar dip, they felt this fatigue, and they went on to devour food throughout the rest of the day. And they were basically packing on the calories for the rest of the day. So again, you start with the same number of calories, but different results.
Yeah, so it's the last few years, everything's come together to really disprove this idea that everyone responds exactly the same to a calorie, which by then inference means that calorie counting works, because that the government tells you that it's 2,000 calories for women, 2,500 for men, and that everyone's the same, and that all you have to do is to read on the label of whatever rubbish food you're eating, number of calories. As long as you go below that limit or do a bit of exercise, you'll lose weight. And of course, you've only got to look around you at the fellow Americans and Britons to show that has failed miserably as a strategy for the last 30 years. But it's still highly promoted, and most of the diet industry still evolves around this basic theory. And most doctors still, unfortunately, still believe in it, rather than focusing on food quality and removing ultra-processed foods from our diets and finding out which foods give you these sugar spikes, these dips, how to personalize that as we dig deeper into this to try and work out which particular foods suit your own metabolism, because of our microbes being so different to each other, we all respond differently to the same foods. And that's really what these ZOE studies have been showing in stark detail, and for the first time actually putting numbers on it, rather than just anecdotes. And I think we showed that you needed at least 1,000 people to do these studies. Remember, the previous, over the last 30 years, the average nutrition study is about 20 people as an intervention. So a lot of these myths in the book I discuss are based on 9 people or something who happen to be nutrition students and totally not related to some 50-year-old female elsewhere, or elderly people of different generations and races and etc. So a lot of the previous stuff is we just have to ignore and tear up and start again. And that's really what that's what spoon failure is really taking, and working out how we've been fooled by this combination of poor initial science, underfunding. It's not necessarily the fault of the nutrition world. They just didn't get the money. It was seen as the worst science to go into, not a real science. But then the food companies themselves sponsoring a lot of the work to distort the direction of research so that they could just get nice labels on their food to tick them as healthy or low cal or low fat or whatever. And now it's high protein. It's with added vitamins. It's whatever sells, but they'll back it up with some rather poor science.
Well, so you have managed to get me a little bit fired up here. We weren't planning to talk about this, but this is the inherent problem with the system, which is that we have lobbyists. We have lobbyists in the United States who are working on the government, and they're affecting the recommendations that go out. They're affecting what food is being served to our children in schools. They're distorting our understanding of what constitutes a healthy diet. And in addition to that, subsidies go out to specific foods, and those subsidies have a massive effect on what foods people get access to. Many of the foods that people can buy, like, why is it that a Happy Meal is less than $5? That drives me nuts. And the answer is because subsidies for sugar and for soy make that possible. So, we're in this new era where the grant money is drying up. I have so many friends who are in academia competing for grants, and there's not enough. And yet what we have here that I think is really exciting is the concept of citizen science. Citizen science is where we collectively, all of you guys with us here today, we collectively make the decision that we're going to get the job done. We're going to stop waiting on our government and these lobbyists to support us. We're going to stop waiting on these grants, which don't exist. We're going to get the job done, and we're going to collectively pool our resources. We'll all chip in. We'll chip in our data. We'll chip in a little bit of money. And what we're going to end up with is a massive, powerful data set with thousands of people and high quality information on every single one of those individuals. And that far eclipses anything that our government is capable of doing. That far eclipses anything that these grants are willing to fund. And we can get ourselves to a better place as a result of that. And that, to me, is really exciting.
Yeah, well, we're actually, we've got over, I think we've just been analyzing our latest data on 10,000 metagenome sequences and food input, and that's already the largest in the world. So we have the ability to, go from that, that data set of 10,000 to 100,000 and then millions. And so I think you're absolutely right. This is a movement. We can't wait for our governments to do things because they are hamstrung by the lobbyists and politics. But this is a ground up movement. And that's really where, we can all just by signing up for these sort of programs, by buying the right sort of foods, by showing the power of the consumer, I think we can actually make a real change. And I think this is why, I've spent all that time, writing books, is obviously not to influence government, but actually just to get the public behind this so that, they can tell other people. And I think that's the new powerful medium now. And I think you've probably found exactly the same. We need these roots. And this is why the age of social media, it's now possible where it probably wasn't, 10 years ago. So,
there's a lot that's changed that has made this possible. And yes, social media is one of them. Yes, the power of our computers is one of them. The other thing is the drop in cost that has taken place for these tests. So, for example, the testing that is done, metagenomic sequencing for this, if you were going to run a laboratory test 10 years ago, how much would it cost you for one person to have that done?
I think it was about $10,000. I think it would be around that.
Right. So, and now we can, get where you can have a continuous glucose monitor, you can have metagenomic sequencing, you can have blood lipid testing and all these different things, and you can package it all together, and the cost is so much less because we're able to, we've made advances in terms of these costs and technology, and that's a beautiful thing. So
that's thanks to genetics, of course. So we were being rude about genetics, but if it wasn't for the genetics revolution, we wouldn't have the tools to look at the microbes. So I think so some of that money was well spent.
So let's talk about bio-individuality, because we've been kind of alluding to this, but I think we want to go a little bit deeper into this topic. We are unique individuals, and in the PREDICT study that was published in Nature Medicine, you showed that how we respond to an individual food can vary dramatic. So, for example, if we were to look at your blood lipids, your triglycerides, after a meal, in that study, you found that the coefficient of variance could be more than 100% difference. Same thing with glucose. You found in that study that your glycemic response, your blood sugar after a meal, could vary by 68% between individuals eating the exact same meal. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking, coefficient of variation is hard to understand, but most people say, well, it's a 6 to 8-fold difference is really what we were sort of seeing across the board here, which is in normal people. So we're not talking about people with strange diseases or these are regular Brits and Americans responding to identical food. And this was far bigger than anyone had thought. And it wasn't just error, because we replicated quite a lot of them. So this really is the basis of, if you've got this big response that differs, that is the whole basis of personalized nutrition. When things don't change, you can't really put people into categories. So if you take everyone's fasted blood, as most medical centers do, they actually squash everyone in the same category. So you can't see big differences between people. And it's only when you stress the system that you start to see these enormous effects, which is really what happens in real life, because we spend most of our lives in a fed state, not fasting, and not resting and fasting in this artificial scenario. So suddenly, these big differences allows you to then go in and then predict who's going to end up in that high band up there, with fats that 6 hours that just don't go away, that cause inflammation, or the person with a really big sugar spike after the meal that's going to again trigger stress and inflammation and lead to weight gain. And so and this varies with food. So that was a fantastic opener to these studies. That really, the rest of it, just was easy. Once we knew we had such big effects to deal with, and that meant we could get on and start using algorithms to predict. Once you've done the test, we could then predict how you respond to any food with over 80% predictive accuracy, which is very good.
Yeah. One of the things that I found to be very interesting in that study, and by the way, for everyone who's here, we can make these studies available to you guys. I'm happy to, since you signed up for this, I'm happy to send out an email later that will provide these studies to you so you can check them out. One of the things that I found to be very interesting in that study, which was the June 2020 Nature Medicine article, was how little of an effect our genetic code actually has on these ideas that we are talking about. So in that study, you showed that the effect of our genetic code on our blood sugar response after a meal accounts for about 30% of the explanation of what's happening with your body. And if you think that's not much, meaning that 70% of your blood sugar rise after your meal is explained by other stuff beyond your genetic code, if you think that's not much, then you should look, you guys, at triglycerides and your blood lipids, because only 4% of your blood lipid response is explained by your genetic code. And perhaps, Dr. Tim, you may want to comment on the role of the microbiome relative to your genetic code when it comes to your blood lipids. Your microbiome is even more powerful than your genetic code in terms of determining how high your blood lipids go up after a meal.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example because, most you go and see a doctor and you get your lipids checked, you get asked about your family history, and you say, oh, well, it's high, it must be genetic. And of course, there is a genetic effect on your fasting levels, but how you actually respond to a fatty meal, how you break down the fats, how long it stays in your system, all the things that really matter end up being primarily non-genetic and due to the makeup of things like your microbiome, which we know can interfere and create these bile salts, which break down the fats early on, other ones which help the transport into the liver, other ones which get it moving fast away from the blood vessels. And so really, we never really imagined that non-genetic factors would be so important in how we deal with fats. And I think this is really fascinating research that we couldn't have guessed before doing these kind of studies. And we're just still finding out every day more different microbes that are involved in this process. But it does show you that the paradigm that everything's genetic, particularly when it comes to lipids, suddenly is disproved when you start to look in real life scenarios, because we're always eating meals and foods. That's how our bodies work. We're not just some static point in time. So yes, I'm not saying genes have no role, but other factors which are more modifiable have a much bigger role. And I think that's really empowering for everyone out there to think that actually by switching around your diet and things, you can totally change the effect that fat has on your body.
Yeah, it's quite interesting to think that 96% of the outcome, 96% of the outcome in terms of your blood lipid after a meal is something that you have control over. And this is actually a quite important point because Sarah Berry, who is also one of the ZOE scientists, one of the lead scientists with ZOE, she published a study using this data showing that it's actually your blood lipids and the rise of your blood lipids after a meal that correlate most clearly with inflammation after a meal. And so for you guys who are here, this is something that you need to be aware of. Have you ever had a meal and felt like it was an inflammatory meal? Your intuition was probably right to some degree, because there is inflammation that takes place after meals, and it correlates most closely with the rise of your blood lipids. And what we're saying is that you have the ability to make choices that can control this and regulate 96% of what determines the blood lipid rise that's correlated to inflammation. Any comments on that and dietary inflammation that you want to make?
No, but I think it's a good point, that because we keep talking about the stresses from blood sugar peaks and insulin peaks, and now the sort of triglyceride peaks we see. But we think this common mechanism is that is stressing the system, and that stress is this small amounts of inflammation regularly build up, and so your body just gets stressed with this low level of inflammation, which has all kinds of other effects on your metabolism and slows it down, and may start interfering with your gut and all the other organs. So it's we still obviously don't understand all the details of this because we don't have all the best markers. But the nice thing is we're starting to find some things that are easy to measure, like triglycerides and sugar, and relate them in these experiments to inflammation. So we can tell you, the public, what's really happening inside your bodies. And so trying to understand a different way of thinking about healthy food. It's not just about, oh, the fat content of this is high. Is this going to give me that stress to my body afterwards, that inflammation? It's not about, it's a completely different paradigm, really, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to understand that what we're referring to, a rise in your blood lipids, your blood fat after a meal, this is not necessarily directly correlated to the fat content of the food that you eat. This can be related to the carbohydrate content of the food that you eat. And so it's important to understand that what we're really referring to is your body is going to respond with an elevation of your blood sugar and an elevation of your lipids, and that is normal, and that is physiologic, and that is not unhealthy. But it can become unhealthy through the choices that you're making in the way that interacts with your gut microbiome. And that's a big part of what we're trying to unpack and understand better through the ZOE project.
Yeah, and what's interesting, we had no idea until we started getting feedback from people, but soon, we had the first few hundred people reporting that we saw the people who were spiking most, particularly on the sugar, were reporting energy levels that, it was linked to energy levels. So the people that successfully did the program, followed the planned diet, got really impressive 80% improvement in energy levels. And we don't understand energy levels very well, but we haven't really looked at it in the medical world much before. We've sort of ignored that side of it, concentration, alertness. It's all related to this idea of fatigue, and it's quite likely that that's related to this getting rid of that inflammation, which is quite a sort of dampening down of your body and how it responds. So that was the most surprising thing for me, was not just people losing weight on the ZOE program, but the fact that they were reporting they had much more energy because they were perhaps getting less of these peaks in the sugars and the fats. And,
yeah. Let me turn this over to the participants. You guys go to the chat box for a moment, and I want to ask you a question. If you ever went to your doctor and you said, I feel fatigue, did you find that your doctor took you seriously? Yes. Or did your doctor not take you seriously? No. So we're getting a mix, but a lot of no's. And I'm just going to tell you, this is being honest from a doctor's perspective, and I'm sure Tim would agree with me on this. It's hard for medical doctors to know what to make of energy. It's hard to know what to make of fatigue because it's very nondescript, okay? It's very nondescript. And what that means is, who knows what the particular reason is and how do we work it up? What do we do? Like, what are we supposed to do as doctors? We're very algorithm-like in the way that we approach problems. But okay, new question for you guys in the chat box. Do you think that your energy levels matter at all to your health? Yes or no? Do your energy levels matter at all to your health? And like literally 100% of you have said yes. I don't even know if there's been one person who said no. And if you did, you probably were just playing with me. So, and what's interesting is that what Dr. Spector has pointed out is that we have demonstrated through some retesting early data with ZOE that people who are doing the program and committing to it are seeing improvements in their energy levels. And if you believe that improvements in your energy levels matter, that's important. And I think that's important to our health. So Any thoughts that you want to add to that, Dr. Tim?
No, I just echoing what you said. It's been on the other end of the consulting desk. It's really tough to advise, and of course, I wasn't trained in nutrition at all in med school, and so I wouldn't even thought to say, well, maybe change your diet. When I was seeing patients 10 years ago. So I think, but this, this is why these sort of studies, these citizen science studies are so great, because people actually report things they want to report. And now you can record it in a way that is scientific, not just anecdotal, because we've got tens of thousands of people doing it. I think we can start to make it into an important endpoint in medicine. So it can now be taken seriously. And in future, everything we do in ZOE is going to say, does this intervention improve or make worse your energy levels, and how does that balance against hunger and body weight? It's all hugely important, and I think we've now got the tools to look at it, which we didn't have before.
Yep. So someone asked if I'm financially benefiting from promoting this. I can assure you I have made $0, and I actually had to pay money to upgrade this so that you guys could be here. So I am not financially benefiting, but I am on the Scientific Advisory Board of ZOE. So I do have an interest in this, and I'm a part of doing this because I believe in it. So, and that's the honest truth. So anyway, the other thing that I wanted to ask about real quick was, there are microbiome tests. There are continuous glucose monitors that exist. There are people that have apps with food feedback. What if we just did one? What if we just did microbiome testing and we didn't do the rest? What would we be missing?
I think at the moment, we don't know the answer to that. I mean, we don't know enough about the microbiome to replace some of these other tests that we're doing. So the microbiome gives you a snapshot of where you are at one point in time. And it does change over life. And because we all have unique microbiomes, the ability from simply a microbiome test to give people nutritional advice, I think, is still limited. We now are getting an idea of what the best foods to eat to boost your good ones and suppress the bad ones are. But I think we don't have in the microbiome yet a replacement for the glucose monitor or the fat test. So I think at the moment, a holistic view is what's needed. Ultimately, once we get to maybe 1 million people, we can work out algorithms that we can use some of these tests to replace each other, and there'll be some overlap. But we still need more understanding of the microbiome. So people that say you can diagnose all kinds of conditions with the microbiome, and there are companies out there who are claiming this kind of stuff, often with lesser technology, really, it's a lot of BS. There are certain things and some things you don't know. And of course, because everyone's unique, we only, at the moment, going on what the common microbes are that we all share, which is still the minority of them. So I'm a big believer in the microbiome, and it's going to get better and better as we understand more. But at the moment, I think we need to look at how the body is responding as well as just the microbes on their own. So understanding diet people on, microbes, and what the body's sort of chemicals are producing is really still crucial.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to understand that we're trying to fit the pieces of the puzzle together. We don't know. We don't know by simply doing a microbiome test that we can give people dietary feedback. If someone is offering you dietary feedback based upon the microbiome test alone, what study are they using? That's what I want to know. And I think it's important for everyone to understand that we're trying to disentangle and unpack this. And by having the combination of microbiome testing, blood lipid testing, continuous glucose monitor, the food app, which is not to be underrated. It's very important because you're entering in your information and combining this all using artificial intelligence and these superpowered computers. This is what allows us actually to have the data for the first time. If someone else is telling you what to do, they don't have the data to back that up. And I would be very curious. Like I would encourage you guys, because there are a lot of choices for tests that exist, and you can choose what you want and what you feel is best for you. But I would encourage you to look for a test that actually has science behind it. So what publications have come from this test or been associated with this test to demonstrate that it actually is capable of giving you the results that you're looking for in terms of your health? And I think it's very important for people, because you guys, unfortunately, can be quite easily preyed upon by companies that want to sell you and market you something, but they don't actually have the science to back up what they're doing. I don't know if you have any thoughts that you want to add to that, Dr. Tim.
No, it is very difficult for the public to look at a website and see what's sort of genuine and what's not. And there might be some publications, and if you don't know that that's, it's a predatory journal that you basically pay them some money and they'll take it, or it's a top journal like Nature Medicine or New England Journal of Medicine, you really got to look carefully. So it is tough for people to do this, but generally they will talk much more about marketing than the science, which they'll try and say is in a black box and it's a secret. Anyone who says it's so secret we can't reveal it basically doesn't have any reality to it. All the good stuff is done by the best scientists, and that's why ZOE has all these scientists, which it doesn't pay at all, wants to look at our data and publish it. And I think that's the new model that we want to get, very much an open, transparent view of what we're doing, rather than black box stuff and a few info commercials.
Yeah. Yep. So anyway, to wrap things up, you guys, this has been great. I thank all of you for coming and joining us today. I just want to sort of bring home some final points and summarize some of the important things that we learned here today from this conversation, which is that you are not genetically pre-programmed to develop disease. That is really not the case for the vast majority of conditions. Yes, there are some, but the vast majority of conditions, you have most of the control over your health outcomes. But the way that it works is unique to you. You are not the same as the average of the population. There are ways in which you are different. And trying to understand and unpack that has been the holy grail of nutrition for a very long time, because all scientists and we as individuals, we all know that we are unique individuals, that there is this bio-individuality. How do we understand that? And finally, here we are, and we have the technology. The cost has dropped, and we have the ability to all come together as a part of a citizen science project, where collecting microbiome, collecting continuous glucose monitor, our blood lipids, the app data with the nutrition stuff, and pulling it all together and getting thousands and thousands, ultimately, hopefully one day, 1 million people all together into this database, we are going to have the most powerful information we've ever had in terms of helping people to understand their own bio-individuality. And there is no other company that is doing it on this level like ZOE, and the research publications speak for themselves, and they will continue to come, and we can definitely share them with you guys. I will share a couple of them after today, okay? So if you're interested, go to joinzoe.com/Dr. B. And if you decide that you're going to take the plunge, this is all in the PDF that you guys were sent. Enter the code Will and Tim 10. That's Will, and then the symbol and Tim 10. And you can sign up. Any closing thoughts? What do you see as the future? Where are we going with this?
I think we're going to be leading this revolution, and this will be something that everyone's going to have on their phone in some way. It's going to get simpler with time, and hopefully it'll be like having an Uber app on everyone's phone to advise them when they're shopping or going to a restaurant about what they should be eating. And I think hopefully in 5 years, even the big food manufacturers will be taking into account people's personalized scores, and we'll start a major shift in the food industry. So I'm very optimistic that this is just the start of an amazing revolution.
Absolutely, 100%. And for you guys, one last closing thought before we go. If you are in the United States, most places in the US, you have the ability to sign up and do ZOE now. It's not every state, but most states in the United States. It has to do with some laws within individual states. It's not personal against ZOE, it's more so laws related to transporting goods. If you are in the UK, I can't share any specific details, but stay tuned. And if you are in other countries, Canada, Australia, the expectation is that we're going to come to see you as well. And it's just a matter of when, and we can't wait for that day. We hope that everyone is given the opportunity to do ZOE if they want to. And, just in general, whether you are choosing to not do the ZOE program, whether you are waiting to see, whether you are in a place where you can't do it at the moment, continue to follow along. Follow me, follow Dr. Spector. Go to joinzoe.com and join their email list. And that way, at a minimum, as we unpack and discover new science, like for example, we talked about the blood sugar dips. That's new science. That was published in April. That's changing the way we think about things. And we will share those new findings with you, whether you have actually done the ZOE program or not done the ZOE program. We will share that with you. And we want you to benefit. So that's my closing thought. And if there's any last thoughts that you have, Dr. Tim, and then we will call it a day.
No, just it's great to have so many fantastic questions and comments, and feel that, just remember that every time you eat anything with 100 trillion microbes inside your gut, you're never going to eat alone again. And that's a nice thought to take home.
So true. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate y'all. Thank you, Dr. Tim Spector. And make sure y'all grab the book Spoon Fed as well. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.